2015. A Cessna 150 takes off from a private gravel strip near Big Lake, Alaska. Moments later, it lies in the middle of a nearby road. A mysterious crash.
There's a lot of questions right now.
A life cut short.
He was the most incredible person.
What caused this popular training aircraft to go down? Alaska is twice the size of Texas, yet less than 20% is accessible by road.
Air travel here in Alaska, it's more of a necessity. It's a way of life.
In the summer, there's an average of 1 air accident every other day.
The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged with investigating transportation accidents. We're the detectives of the aviation world. We determine probable cause and then go one step further and make recommendations to keep that accident from happening again.
October 8, 2015. Regional Chief Clint Johnson and aircraft accident investigator Millicent Hoytel field reports about a crash.
We have an airplane down up in the Wasilla Big Lake area. Can you give us a little insight there? Okay, obviously fatalities.
Thank you. The aircraft nosedived onto a street and is on fire. 1 fatality.
Somebody else called in. They got it sounds like a Cessna 150. The valley is a quagmire of roads up there, so probably want to get up there probably sooner than later because this thing is in the middle of the road.
Okay. With any accident, lives are changed forever, and that sticks with us. I don't want that to happen to other families. I don't want to see an accident or have something tragic happen that could have been prevented.
Investigator Hoytel races against the clock to get on scene and start her investigation.
So now we are on our way up to Big Lake.
Big Lake, Alaska lies about 20 miles north of Anchorage. But the small community, with a population of approximately 3,000, is accessible by road only by driving over 60 miles around a waterway called the Knik Arm.
We are losing daylight, so we won't have very much time before it gets dark and we lose light. So I want to work fast and document as much as I can before it gets too dark.
Winter is coming to Alaska, and during this long, cold season, the available hours of daylight are dwindling. By the time investigator Hoytel arrives at the crash site, she will have less than 2 hours of light remaining.
During the initial on-scene investigation, daylight is very, very important. The investigator needs to see how the airplane arrived at the accident site. Telltale signs of this would be maybe tree breaks, road scars. Wreckage debris paths can be immense. They could be several hundred feet. The investigator is going to document exactly where each one of these parts and pieces are, and doing that in the darkness is definitely challenging, no doubt about that.
Yep, that's where I'm going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. So it's just straight down this road?
Straight down. You can't miss the plane. It's right in the road.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
As investigator Hoytel arrives on scene, she gets her first look at the wreckage.
Hi.
You guys with NTSB?
Yes, I am. I'm Millicent Hoytel.
Investigator Hoytel quickly confirms initial reports that the plane was a Cessna 150. Simple, sturdy, and relatively inexpensive, it's one of the most popular civilian planes ever produced.
The Cessna 150 is, for the most part, the basic trainer. I did my initial training in a Cessna 150, very, very simple in design, but it does a good job.
But for the NTSB, many questions about the accident remain. Most notably, the identity of the pilot killed in the crash.
We've got one in there.
Okay. Is anybody else on scene? Any family?
They
okay.
were here. They're all gone.
Okay. Was this airplane insured? Does anybody know?
Don't
have insurance on it?
No.
The age of the pilot, do we know?
23.
Oh. Okay.
Just a young man.
Okay. This was a young pilot at the beginning of his career. He had just started flying for a small airline.
The pilot was the only person on board. He used his Cessna 150 for his personal flights.
I met Joe through going to the same church, and people at church had told him about me flight instructing, so he came over to my house to learn to fly and get his pilot license.
In Alaska, you'll find that somebody gets involved in flying much earlier in life than the average person in the lower 48. A lot of young folks will have their pilot's license actually before they have their driver's license. Unfortunately, in our office, we have seen a number of young pilots that have been killed or hurt in airplanes.
Investigator Hoytel must race to gather information before night falls.
My goal when I get on scene is to document everything as it is before it's moved or touched or disturbed or anything is changed with it. I want to spend as much time as I can looking at it from 360 degrees and really trying to capture every possible thing as it was before something was changed.
One crucial factor that can alter the nature of the accident scene is the removal of the victims.
In fatal accidents here in Alaska, we strive to be on scene before the victims are recovered. Switch positions, control positions can be moved. It's very, very important to be able to determine before those victims are removed from the airplane.
While Investigator Hoytel documents the wreckage, the medical examiner arrives to recover the victim.
He was laying on him, so before I go tearing it apart.
On the wing is fine, thank you. The recovery of the victim is a high priority, so as soon as I was able to get a few pictures, we stopped our work so that the ME could do their job. I appreciate your help.
No problem.
With the victim removed, the on-scene investigation can continue. During a briefing with state troopers, Investigator Hoytel learns that there were witnesses.
Who were the ones that saw it? How many people saw it?
I have 4 names.
Nobody actually saw the impact.
Right. They were here pretty quick after.
Yep.
Nobody saw it.
Yeah, they ran out with the fire extinguisher right away.
One of the witnesses, a former employer of the pilot, is still on scene.
He used to work for us. He's been flying for the last year, so he has almost 1,000 hours, worked all the overtime he could get, and he bought his airplane, and he loves to fly.
The witness explains that the pilot worked in Bethel and would often make the long flight back home to Big Lake. With roughly 1,000 hours in the air, he was not a novice pilot.
He took off, toward the swamp, and he made a sharp turn, high enough. It wasn't like a buzz or anything, but I could hear him go over. Okay. So he's at full throttle.
The witness offers another important clue. The plane's engine sounded as if it was running normally. But investigators will need to verify this with the physical evidence. Another clue. Investigators now have a rough idea of the plane's flight path.
So we know that it departed a nearby strip and buzzed this house kind of right behind us and then made a steep left turn and fell out of sight.
Knowing the plane's approximate flight path is an important piece of the puzzle for investigators. But it raises the question, what could have gone wrong in the moments before the crash? The list of possible causes is long, including structural failure, a mechanical issue, unexpected weather, or human performance issues. To find out what may have brought this plane down, Investigator Hoytel must take a closer look at the physical evidence.
So, let's see, left flap burned, left wing has twisting on the outboard portion.
Yeah, and the wing slap of the right wing is straight down to the ground.
So, torsional twisting on the left wing.
Torsional twisting tells investigators the plane may have been spinning as it came down. The evidence also indicates the plane came down at a steep angle. The question is, why? In order to learn more about the possible causes of the crash, the NTSB needs the wreckage removed from the road to a secure location. But there isn't a company immediately available in Alaska to recover the aircraft, and investigators are running out of time. The crash has closed down a public road, and state troopers need it removed quickly so traffic can move freely again.
Both Kevin Wyckoff and his son are out of town, so we're trying to figure out who's going to do recovery, and if there's no insurance, I don't know where we're going to take it. We're kind of scrambling to find somebody who would be able to recover this airplane and also a place to store it. We want to make sure that it's secured and not tampered with so that we can come back and do an exam later. So we're starting to lose light, so we'd like to get it off the road as soon as we can.
Because the plane is not insured, removal becomes more difficult. If they can't transport it before darkness falls, the plane may continue blocking the road till morning. The wreckage will also be at the mercy of the elements and could be altered or tampered with overnight.
We're not sure who's going to pick it up. I can tell you right now, they've got this whole road shut down.
Do you have any ideas of somebody who would recover this plane?
The NTSB must race to transport the plane to a secure location before nightfall. Otherwise, this may be their last shot at examining the wreckage before it deteriorates.
Ah, dang it.
The NTSB is investigating the fatal crash of a Cessna 150 near the town of Big Lake, Alaska. But removing the wreckage to a secure location has proven to be a more difficult task than usual.
We're kind of scrambling to find somebody who would be able to recover this airplane and also a place to store it.
While waiting to hear about the removal of the wreckage, investigator Hoytel continues to examine the plane for clues. Based on the physical evidence, it appears that the plane came down at a steep angle. A steep angle of impact could imply a loss of control. Another possible culprit, a sudden loss of lift, like a stall. But since the plane was not equipped with any flight tracking technology, investigators will have to piece together what happened using the physical evidence, weather data, witness accounts, and the pilot's paper trail, such as logbooks. The next step is to examine the engine to determine if a mechanical issue may have contributed to the crash.
The engine is right up under here. It looks like the numbered 4 cylinder is knocked off. It was across the street over there. There's a lot of fire damage to the number 2 cylinder. There was a lot of compression damage on the engine, a lot of impact damage.
The engine is made of aluminum alloy and other highly durable lightweight metals. It's one of the heaviest, strongest parts of the airplane by far.
The fact that it knocked off the number 4 cylinder and left it across the street, that would take an extreme amount of force to do that. It's something that I've never seen in a wreckage before. We can see from the wreckage that it looks like it impacted in a very steep nose-low angle. There was a post-impact fire that consumed the cockpit and most of the fuselage and part of the left wing. So about 50% of the plane or so is burnt, but there's a lot of questions right now. I want to find out about any maintenance that have been done on the engine. He was a young pilot, so I'd like to see his training records and see how much time and experience he had. So we want to get it recovered so that we can spend more time with it later when we can access all the parts easier and get to the engine.
Investigator Hoytel finally received some good news about removing the wreckage.
I solved your problem.
Yes.
Temporarily.
Oh.
So Lieutenant Barlow's going to bring a truck and an 18-foot trailer. We're going to basically put whatever we can on the trailer. We'll put it inside our secured gate, and then it'll be up to you to find a secure place that you need to put it for whatever you guys need.
That sounds awesome.
But we can do that for the night anyway to get it
till tomorrow.
Handled. Yeah,
okay.
That would be fine.
Okay.
Air safety in Alaska is definitely a team sport. It's no doubt about it. When tragedy strikes, I think everybody comes to the rescue, lends a hand. Keep in mind that we're working in very, very remote areas. So those folks typically will all band together. It's very heartwarming when you see that happen.
While investigators wait for the wreckage to be removed, they locate the nearby airfield where the plane departed from.
Because the airplane crashed a short distance from the airstrip, we want to go look at the strip and see the environment that he took off from, see if there's anything that stuck out as unusual or different to us. I want to put myself as close to the same position as the pilot was, as the witnesses were, as it was when it originally happened.
The airfield where the pilot took off is a private gravel strip, typical of small airfields in Alaska.
The private airstrips can be challenging, no doubt about it. It could be very short airstrips, could be covered, mud covered. I mean, there's a number of different perils that you need to deal with.
Because the pilot was familiar with the airport and the strip and the surrounding area, it makes me wonder what was different about this day, about this flight, about this departure that he crashed.
At the airstrip, investigator Hoytel and James Grogan from the FAA encounter two eyewitnesses who were friends of the pilot.
You work here at the shop?
Every day.
Okay.
The last 7 years. He took off. It seemed a little strange because I've seen Joe take off 50 times.
Oh, yeah.
He never had anything, but this time there was a little bit more angle of attack than normal. He made a left turn, and that's when I kind of lost him behind the trees.
Okay. Did you hear engine sounds?
Okay, I'm not sure if it was he applied power a little bit or whether coming in this way, it does make a change in the engine sound. And then it was silent for maybe a split second, and then we heard a crunch. So then I screamed down 911, grabbed a fire extinguisher and my buddy, and we were right here. I told him to look right, I'll look left, but we didn't need to. Strangest thing was, though, that I've never seen Joe fly other than a perfect, in fact, he's one of the only people I know who actually does a walk-around pre-flight, even if he just landed and was off for 5 minutes.
He'll still do pre-flight. I think the only significant thing is what his father said, is he had a new prop on the plane.
The witnesses have given valuable information, but the loss of a friend is just hours old for them.
I fought the fire from if this were the plane, let's say this is the front of the plane, I got the fire beat down here, I got the fire beat down here, went into the cockpit, got him covered off down into the fuselage, and that's when I noticed he didn't make it.
I'm Vietnam veteran, and so Spanish.
And I appreciate the troopers saying that there's people we can talk to.
And I can give you contact information. We have transportation disaster assistance at the NTSB, and they can help you with any of that. Right. That's what they're there for. They reach out to family and friends and anybody, and they can.
This is the person I've seen dead from my Coast Guard experience, but never a friend.
Right.
Yeah.
So, dude, I appreciate this.
Yeah.
And you can call.
I appreciate you taking the time. I can't imagine what this has been like for you, so I'm so sorry.
It hasn't set in yet, but I know. He was the most incredible person.
Thank you. Thank you.
67 years old.
Here's a compass, Joe.
learning more about the pilot and people that were involved in the accident gives you the big picture and really, I think, becomes the motivator behind doing this job, in that you don't want to see another family have to go through that.
The witnesses have given investigators several key pieces of information. Notably, they saw the plane was pointed up at an unusually high angle immediately after takeoff. Takeoff is one of the moments planes are most vulnerable to aerodynamic stalls.
An aerodynamic stall is basically when the wing stops producing lift. And this is an aerodynamic stall as opposed to an engine stall. It doesn't have anything to do with the engine itself.
Stalls are a product of two factors: speed and the pitch or angle of the wing. Lift is generated by the difference in velocity between the wing and the air flowing past it. But if the plane's speed falls and the wing's pitch increases to the point that airflow is disrupted, the result is a sudden loss of lift. The wing will drop and the pilot could lose control of the airplane. Stalls are most frequent at takeoff and landing due to low airspeed and the pitch of the wing. The remedy for a stall is to level the wings and gain airspeed. But at low altitude, there may not be enough room to recover.
In this accident, witnesses tell us that they see a very nose-high attitude, and that's fairly consistent with aerodynamic stalls.
The witnesses also reported the pilot had a new prop on his plane.
A recently installed prop raises questions. Where did the prop come from? Was it new or refurbished, used? Was the maintenance done properly? And was it an approved propeller for this type of airplane?
An issue with the prop could have been fatal.
Basically, we're taught from day one to look very closely at the leading edge of that propeller. And what you're looking for is any nicks. Once that propeller is operating and it's bending and it's moving and you're doing power changes, that nick will propagate into a crack and then eventually go across the whole portion of the blade. Obviously, when you lose a portion of that blade, there's a tremendous imbalance. And a lot of times what will happen is it'll actually shake the engine off the airplane with disastrous results.
To verify if a new prop was installed, investigators examined the plane's logbooks.
In aviation, there's a variety of logbooks. It can be in a plane, in a hangar, at their house, in the car. It's hit and miss.
I don't know whether the logbooks are with the plane or with his dad or where he kept the logbook, because he was really a stickler on paperwork.
The prop is a question that we need to answer. We need to find the logbooks and look at the maintenance history and find out if it had any factor in this accident.
The possibility of a new prop and a potential stall give the NTSB two theories of what may have caused the crash. To determine if either may have played a role in the accident, the NTSB needs to get the wreckage removed and transported to a secure location. State troopers have provided a flatbed trailer and manpower to aid in removal. With NTSB supervision, sections of the plane are cut to make removal easier. And Investigator Hoytel can finally get a clear look at the prop. The propeller offers an immediate clue that may be the key to determining why a young pilot lost his life.
There's a chunk missing out of the end of the propeller, so there's still a lot of questions at this point.
The NTSB is working with Alaska State Troopers to recover the wreckage of a Cessna 150 from a local road. Investigators are getting a closer look at the damage to the road to determine whether or not the engine was running at the time of the crash.
So I bet that's what took that chunk out.
The tip of the prop?
Yeah. This is most likely from the propeller strike. And there's a chunk missing out of the end of the propeller, which is probably this chunk of cement right here. So it looks like it was the engine was making power when it hit. The ground scars were significant. Once the airplane was picked up and we could see the damage that was done to the road, it told us that there was power behind the engine, that the propeller was turning, and that the airplane impacted at a high rate of speed.
The mangled prop indicates the engine was running at the time of the crash, but it doesn't mean the engine can be ruled out as a factor in the accident. To learn more, the NTSB must conduct a wreckage layout, a detailed examination of the evidence.
There's still a lot of questions at this point, so I'm hoping that the layout and exam can answer a lot of those questions.
At NTSB headquarters in Anchorage, the focus turns to the pilot's background.
Got a few minutes to see what you got?
Yeah, we know the pilot was a young pilot, about 1,000 hours.
Okay.
500 to 1,000 hours. There's statistically an area in there where they're more likely to have an accident. You're now comfortable with flying the airplane. You've kind of dropped your guard for the most part, and that's where a number of these accidents take place.
He got his commercial license in the end of 2014, got his flight instructor rating up here in January of 2015. And he flew all over the state after he bought his airplane. He was very good about trying to learn how to do the job right. Well, I've never seen a student do it as quick as he did. Joseph really enjoyed flying.
In addition to the pilot's hours in the air, investigators are examining the planes he flew, which include a different model than the one that crashed.
He recently started flying out in Western Alaska, flying 172s there.
Oh boy, okay.
The pilot had just started flying for a local operator, flying their 172s commercially. And then when he was home, not flying for work, he would fly in this 150.
With a difference of 50 horsepower and over 3 more feet of wingspan, the 172 is a slightly more powerful and versatile aircraft.
He had been flying these more powerful 172s quite a bit, and he had just come home the day before and jumped in the 150 and was flying it. There's a lot less power, a lot less abilities to overcome any kind of a situation.
The stall speeds would have been different, its performance characteristics would have been different, its ability to fly in different wind conditions, it would have handled differently.
The question for the NTSB is, did the pilot's professional experience cause him to overestimate the capability of his personal aircraft and lead to a stall?
We should run this one all the way out, you know. He deserves it, the family deserves it, so let's run it all the way out. Just let me know what you need, and appreciate the update.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Several days after the accident, investigator Millicent Hoytel travels to a hangar where the plane is being stored for a wreckage layout. The Cessna 150 was not equipped with any flight tracking technology, and the plane was flying too low to be captured on radar. Without such tools, the NTSB is seeking any physical evidence in the wreckage that can shed some light on the possible cause of the crash. Assisting the investigation is James Grogan, FAA Flight Safety Inspector, and Textron Aviation's Brian Weber, in what's known as the NTSB Party System.
One of the challenges of being an NTSB investigator is we can't be experts on every single airplane, so we employ a system called the NTSB Party System. It allows the airframe manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, and the operator to join the investigative team under the watchful eye of the NTSB investigator.
Before work even begins, there's an issue. Investigators have been trying to track down the plane's logbooks.
Nobody seems to know who has the logbooks. And Dad said he didn't carry them in the airplane.
While we look at the airframe and the engine, it's important to have the logbooks there with us so that if a question arises, we can go look at the logbooks and see what work was done and when it was done.
Logbooks are a vital source of information for investigators.
The logbooks are very, very important for us to be able to take a look at the history of that airplane as far as maintenance, any problems. There are a number of logbooks typically involved in a general aviation airplane. There's an airframe logbook, there's an engine logbook, and then in most cases there's also a propeller logbook. So typically when we're asking for logbooks, we're looking for those three documents.
With the logbook still an open question, investigators press on with the wreckage layout.
This wreckage layout is challenging because of the amount of fire damage that destroyed approximately 50% of the airplane.
Much of the Cessna 150's airframe is made of aluminum and was destroyed in the fire, but other parts have survived.
One thing that tends to survive the post-crash fires are the steel cables connected to the plane's control surfaces.
Investigators are able to establish control continuity, or the ability of the pilot to use the plane's control surfaces, by following the steel cables from the cockpit area to the rudder, elevator, and flaps.
So far, everything is connected as it should have been and moves freely. We haven't seen anything unexpected or unusual.
While investigators continue to examine the wreckage, a call comes in about the status of the plane's logs.
I do.
You do?
That'd be awesome.
They would like the logbooks. If you want to bring them, that's fine. If you want me to send Christopher up to get them or something, just let me know what you want. We'll figure it out.
The call provides a critical break in the case. The pilot's logbooks have been tracked down and will finally be delivered to investigators.
The important thing is that they're on the way.
The logbooks could provide crucial information. While investigators wait for them to arrive, they turn their attention to the engine. It's badly damaged by the impact.
I don't know what we're going to be able to do with this engine. We were all surprised at the amount of damage that the engine sustained. It had extensive impact as well as fire damage.
Investigators set the engine aside. It will be torn down and examined by an expert mechanic at a later date. The plane's logs have arrived, and investigators spot an immediate red flag.
Here's the problem. I don't see a logbook entry saying that it was put on. That prop should even be on this airplane. And there's nothing in the airframe logbook that says any propeller besides this propeller is installed on this airplane. That's interesting.
The logbooks open up a new and surprising mystery. The propeller currently on the plane does not match the prop documented in the logbook.
Well, my understanding was initially, because we had 4 different stories, was that this prop was brand new. He put on himself 2 days ago, and that's not what happened. So it was put on by a mechanic. We just don't know now if it's an approved prop.
Right.
And it wasn't properly annotated in the logbook. Is that?
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is we don't have a logbook for this prop, and this logbook says nothing about
a new prop,
a cents-an-inch propeller being installed.
Investigators have a mystery prop. It's not documented in the airframe logbook, and the prop logbook they have is for a different prop entirely. But there is one possible solution to the prop mystery. If investigators can obtain a serial number, they may be able to determine not only the exact model of the propeller, but where and when it was installed.
If we took that plate off, would it have the information on the inside?
I don't think it would.
Is this the number we're looking for here?
That says model.
Okay.
So in theory, the number would be right below.
Right where those big deep scratches are?
Yeah, there's a huge gouge right there.
A key section of the propeller has been badly damaged in the crash. Recovering the serial number seems unlikely.
But if we, traced over it...
We could try.
Like a grease pencil or something?
I have a grease pencil.
Let's try.
With new hope, the team struggles to recover the serial number. If they can determine whether or not this was an approved propeller, they could be one step closer to figuring out what caused this crash. The NTSB is several hours into a detailed wreckage exam of a Cessna 150 that crashed near Big Lake, Alaska, killing the 23-year-old pilot. Investigators discover the plane's prop isn't documented in any of the maintenance logs, so they're trying to obtain the serial number to determine whether or not it was an approved propeller for this plane. If it wasn't, or if it was installed incorrectly, it may have played a role in the accident. Investigators are unable to get the serial number from the propeller.
I don't know where it came from, when it was installed, how it was installed. Officially, at least.
And it sounds like he may have done it himself. He worked in a mechanic shop, he did a little bit of stuff.
So, yeah, I guess the logbooks hadn't quite caught up with the actual maintenance that was being performed.
Yeah.
Again, some of the stories have gone from he just put it on either today or yesterday to the logbook said it's been on for
months.
Without knowing the model, we don't really know how it affects things.
If a non-standard propeller is put on the airplane or it is not put on correctly, it could affect the performance of the airplane. Because the question of the propeller was raised, we want to find out more about where it came from, who put it on, and when the work was done. It's a question that we need to answer.
Investigators return to the logbooks to see if they can discover any more clues.
Yeah, installed sportsman stole kit.
The logbooks show the plane has what's called a stole kit.
Been on there for 2 years.
This modification allows aircraft to have more lift at low speeds.
Stole kits are probably a little bit more common in this area for the simple reason that we're operating in very remote areas, very short strips, could be on gravel bars, where you need that extra low speed performance.
Yeah, so I wonder how much that does change the stall speeds.
Investigators know the plane was pointed up at an unusually high angle. A stall is a real possibility, but flying a plane equipped with a stole kit would make an aerodynamic stall less likely. While the wreckage layout has ruled out a major failure of the airframe, it hasn't brought clarity to the investigation. Could the mystery prop have contributed to the accident? Does the presence of a stole kit rule out the possibility of an aerodynamic stall? And is there a factor investigators have yet to discover?
Aviation accident investigations are very complex. At the end of the on-scene, the wreckage layout, there are many cases where we come away with more questions than we have answers. Once that door is opened, it's our job to close that door.
With much of the airplane destroyed by fire and the remaining physical evidence inconclusive, Investigator Hoytel reviews her notes from the case, searching for new insight.
The witnesses provided us a lot of information about the accident and what they saw. After he took off, he started climbing out with a very high angle of attack, and shortly after they saw the left wing dip, and then the airplane disappeared from sight.
The witness testimony is consistent with a stall, but can it be connected with what investigators know about the pilot's experience and training?
The pilot was flying professionally a 172 and personally had his own 150 that he would fly. I'm wondering if there's a difference in between this slightly larger, more powerful airplane that he's gotten used to as opposed to the 150 that he personally owned. So I'd like to look at some of the performance differences between the two to see how much of a difference there is between the stall speeds.
Evidence discovered on scene points to a possible stall in the pilot's Cessna 150 shortly after takeoff. The question is, do the numbers in the book line up with the investigators' understanding of the final moments of the flight?
The range for the stall speed in the 150 is 36 to 40 knots and 48 knots for the 170. To get that slow, to be near the stall speeds, it would be a very high pitch angle, which is what the witnesses say, that they saw him climbing out at a very steep rate.
If the pilot was accustomed to the 172, it may have led him to misjudge the 150's capability and try to climb at a rate that was too steep. To see if the environment could have played a role in the crash, Investigator Hoytel checks the aviation weather reporting for that day.
These were the conditions around the time of the accident. So the wind would have been right down the runway at 13, gusting to 19 knots. So especially for a 150, that would have been a substantial wind condition for him to deal with.
The reports echo what the pilot's mentor experienced near Big Lake that day.
The day that he was flying, I had just landed in Big Lake just about around the same time, and the wind was really choppy. It was quite strong in the air, but on the ground at Big Lake, it was not blowing at all. And so there was a deceiving factor about the wind that day.
The combination of choppy winds aloft and a less powerful aircraft may have been too much to recover from.
If he gets too steep and too slow and this gust of wind comes along, there's not much room for error.
And while it paints a compelling theory of what may have contributed to the crash, new information about the mysterious propeller could change the entire case.
A friend of the pilot's had a spare propeller put on the airplane before the accident.
Instead of 2 propellers in this investigation, there are now 3. The NTSB is seeking a probable cause in the case of a Cessna 150 that crashed near Big Lake, Alaska. A close look at the logbooks has led the NTSB to believe the plane had an undocumented prop. Working in coordination with the FAA, investigators have discovered the truth. A new propeller was scheduled to be installed on October 9th, 1 day after the accident. The prop on the plane when it crashed must be looked into as a possible factor in the accident.
We discovered that months before the accident, the airplane needed a new propeller, and so a friend of the pilot's had a spare propeller at their hangar, the exact same type. So that was the propeller that was put on the airplane before the accident. And a new propeller was ordered, which was going to be put on the airplane the day after the accident.
While it appeared to be a lead in the case, because the installed propeller was identical to the model previously on the plane, investigators have ruled out the prop as a possible cause. Investigator Hoytel meets with Regional Chief Clint Johnson to brief him on her findings.
Hey, I wanted to update you on the Big Lake accident. We finished up the wreckage exam. We didn't find anything there that looked unusual or broken or like any type of malfunction. We were able to get control continuity.
Okay. There was some talk about a propeller, maybe a modification to the propeller. Where did that?
Right. The airplane was modified in a couple ways. There was a stole kit that was put on. It was not a new condition for him. The propeller, there was some on-scene discussion about maybe it was a new propeller that was put on.
No issues with the prop?
No.
Okay. So wind-wise I know there may be some reports of turbulence at altitude.
We have reports from people flying at the time that around 300 feet they were picking up some gusty winds in nearby airports. So he wouldn't have been too high above the tree level at this point, maybe 300 feet or so. So if he starts picking up any gusty wind conditions, it's possible that's what maybe picked up the right wing and dropped the left right at the same time that he was at that critical angle of attack, and it may have been just enough to push it over the edge. So now we're really left with the witness statements that talked about that steep pitch during the climb out and the left wing drop before it went out of sight. So from what we have in the on-scene and the torsional twisting in the wing and how it impacted in conjunction with the witness statements, it looks like this airplane stalled.
At the end of most regional NTSB investigations, a report including probable cause is sent to headquarters in Washington, D.C., where it's reviewed and approved by the Director of the Office of Aviation Safety. While the final report has not yet been completed, the evidence suggests windy conditions and the plane's nose-high attitude may have contributed to a loss of control. Loss of control is the #1 killer in aviation accidents, and finding solutions has become a primary focus for the NTSB in recent years.
The NTSB has been very, very concerned about what we refer to as loss of control or stall. It's a very common accident, unfortunately, but it's very preventable. So it's basically training, awareness, airspeed management, and managing that angle of attack. I think the biggest takeaway here is just knowing the limitations of the aircraft.
For friends and family, the memory of the pilot will endure.
What impressed me about Joseph, he was very methodical about studying and learning what we were going to be practicing, so he was a really good student. He really enjoyed flying, but as meticulous as he was and as good a pilot as he was, the wind factor probably put Joseph in a more vulnerable situation, and there was no time to recover.
Stalls do not discriminate based on pilot experience, the type of airplane you're in, or if you're 300 feet off the ground or 30,000 feet off the ground. They can happen at any time. Pilots have to be vigilant. Increasing awareness and spreading the word is a way for us to help prevent another accident from happening.